Hello again and welcome back to the Starting 5 video series. We've got a festive one for you today. We're in the Christmas spirit here at SDS and we're going to give you one gift for each SEC men's basketball team fan base. It's time to start getting real and hunkering down and fixing what's wrong, and these teams all need a little something this Christmas season to be in their best spot for SEC play. Let's start at the top. Let's start with Alabama. They just had a narrow escape against a tough Furman team last week. What I've left under the tree for Coach Nate Oates is a trip to Cameron Indoor Stadium where the Duke Blue Devils play. As you'll remember, he and Coach K had that little beef about COVID-19 protocols, whether they should be playing or not. Nate Oates firmly on the side that basketball should be played right now. Coach K, not so much. Duke canceled one of its non-conference games after losing to Illinois at home. Even though Coach K and Oates have spoken on the phone, according to Oates, what better than a trip to meet face-to-face and patch things up? And, hey, get a game in while you're there. Alabama versus Duke, now that'd be a fun game, especially if John Petty Jr. is shooting the lights out like he's been known to do. Next up, Kentucky could use a lot of things under the Christmas tree this year, but what I'm going to give them is a three-point shooter. The Wildcats have been awful from behind the arc. Brandon Boston Jr. not hitting anything. Davion Mintz, the transfer from Creighton, not hitting anything. Terrence Clark has really become sort of their best three-point shooter, and that's not a strength of his game. Clark is much better when he's driving to the lane and using his insane athleticism to make plays, dunking, making plays, passing out to open teammates on the perimeter, but they're just not hitting the shots right now. So man, I mean, if they had Tyler Hero this year, could you imagine how much better that this team would be? Until Brandon Boston develops into a three-point shooter, what Kentucky needs under the tree this year is somebody who can knock down some long-range shots. Next up is LSU. Let's give Will Wade a reprieve from all of this NCAA stuff. That's what Santa can bring him this year, and LSU fans would love that. As much as LSU and Will Wade sort of embody this bad boy mentality, it's never fun to have an NCAA cloud hanging over your heads. Just ask me. I know, I'm a Mizzou football fan. So a clean slate from the NCAA is what's under the tree for Will Wade and the Tigers. Speaking of the Tigers, let's move to a different group of Tigers, the Missouri Tigers. What I have for Konzo Martin's squad is Javon Pickett playing like he does in bragging rights every single year. What I have for Mizzou this year is bragging rights Javon Pickett for the entire season. That guy really loves to play Illinois. It's crazy how much better he is against the Illini than he is against anyone else. If he played every game like he does against the Illini, he'd be an all-SEC player, hands down. So that's what the Tigers get for this year's Christmas. Bragging rights Javon Pickett for a full season. Now, let's have Santa move to the other Columbia and talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks. So far, the Gamecocks are a disappointing 1-2, but that's only 3 games that they've played. Their game against Clemson, a rivalry matchup, that was canceled over the weekend due to COVID-19 in the Gamecocks program. So what I'm leaving for them under the tree is just more games. They've got to get some more games against whoever. It doesn't matter who at this point. Get some Division II teams in there. It doesn't matter. They just need to get on the court so they can enter SEC play as the strong team that they've been in league action the past 2 years. Next up, we're heading to Tennessee, where I've got something under the tree for Yves Pons. Pons is the reigning SEC Defensive Player of the Year, but his offensive game is off to a horrendous start this season. He is only hitting 16.7% of his threes, and he hasn't been much better from two-point range either, knocking down only 35% of his shots on the season. Now, he impacts the game in other ways, obviously, with his blocks, his steals, his rebounding. He's a great all-around player. He's even a good passer. But if he could just develop that jump shot a little bit more, then Tennessee would be that much more dangerous, and he would be a round 1 NBA draft pick, no questions asked. Now, we're going to bunch Auburn and Texas A&M together here because both of those teams sport a player that I don't think is getting enough attention. So I'm getting a publicist for Justin Powell, the sharpshooting Auburn freshman who can light it up from three-point range, and big man Emmanuel Miller, the sophomore out of Texas A&M. He's averaging almost a double-double, 18.5 points, 9.8 rebounds per game off the bench for the most part too. He only has 1 start this season. We're not talking about these guys enough, and I want to get their names out there, so Santa's leaving them a publicist under the tree. Ole Miss is off to a good start to this season, and I've really loved what I've seen from Arizona State transfer Romello White. He's been just what the doctor ordered for a team that struggled in the post in recent years. But now they don't have the backcourt depth that they used to. For the Rebels, I'm leaving an extra year of eligibility for Breon Tyree. This team would be so much more fun if he was still around, because what it lacks right now is a true point guard who can not only score but can distribute a little bit. Devontae Shuler is a great scorer, but he's not as developed as a passer as Breon Tyree was. So if you had Breon Tyree still on this team, the Rebels, they might be a top 5 SEC program at this point, just with the way that they've played thus far. Speaking of teams with depth issues, issues, how about Vanderbilt? I'm just going to leave them some more depth on the bench in general under the tree, because they had a game the other day where only 4 total players scored. All 4 of those players scored in double figures. Dylan Disu with 10, Scottie Pippen Jr. led the way with 25, and I'm still on the Scottie Pippen Jr. bandwagon, don't worry. Those guys who scored in double figures got 0 help from any of the other 8 players who saw game time. Those players combined for 0 for 11 from the floor for 0 points. That's almost unheard of in college basketball, to have such a disparity between the guys who score and the guys who don't. So for Vanderbilt and Jerry Stackhouse, let's just get some more depth in there under the tree. Next up is Mississippi State, another team that's going through a rebuilding process. What I have for the Bulldogs is another shot at Dayton. Man, I wish that they could have had another shot at Dayton. They recently lost 85-82 in double overtime against the Flyers in Atlanta, and that was a game that they could have had, and I bet that they're kicking themselves about it, because Jalen Crutcher, 4 free throws down the stretch, that was the difference in the game for the Flyers. Down the stretch, it was Iverson Molinar and Jalen Crutcher doing the battling back and forth, but ultimately, Dayton came out on top. But I think if you played that game again, DJ Stewart, Iverson Molinar, and the Bulldogs might have another win under their belts. So I'm going to give them another shot at Dayton to redeem what they lost in Atlanta. Next up, Arkansas, where coach Eric Musselman does wonders with the NCAA transfer portal. He was one of the first adopters of it, and he's one of the best at getting guys who can compete right away to his team. JD Note this year from Jacksonville, Justin Smith from Indiana. You've got Jalen Tate from Northern Kentucky, and you've got Connor Vanover from Cal. All those guys are key parts of what this team is doing right now, and this team is clicking on all cylinders heading into SEC play. What I would get for Musselman, let's just get him another transfer portal. If he's doing so well with these guys, why not give him another one, see what he can do with it? Let's get some more transfers into Fayetteville. I know that this is a game that Arkansas fans are going to love, because if it's going to lead to success on the court, it doesn't matter. They'll take players from anywhere. So let's give Musselman even more of an advantage with finding these diamonds in the rough who are playing on smaller schools. Let's get him more access to these guys, because what he's selling in Arkansas, it's working right now, and I can't wait to see how this team fares in SEC play when that starts. The last 2 teams on Santa's list are Florida and Georgia, but there's nothing that Santa can really bring to those 2 schools that their point guards aren't already giving to them. Georgia fans, Severe Wheeler is your Santa. He's averaging 8.6 assists per game, and some of his dimes that he's dishing out are incredible. He's Santa around Athens, he's making his teammates better, and he's just really exciting to watch, even after his string of double-doubles to start the season came to an end. Meanwhile, at Florida, Tyree Appleby. Man, the Cleveland State transfer, he's been a lot of fun to watch too. I swear, 90% of his assists are alley-oops. Just watch that guy play. He seems to have a knack for getting the ball to his teammates in the dunk spot. He's finding passing lanes that only he can see, and usually it ends with the throwdown. Florida's off for another week still. Get well soon, Keontae Johnson. We're all rooting for you. We're glad you're doing better. But when and if they come back to the floor, Tyree Appleby is going to be an important piece of what they have going, and I'm sure he'll continue to serve up alley-oops to anybody who wants to run the court with him. So from all of us here at the Starting 5 video series, have a happy holiday, have a great new year, and we'll see you soon.